Welcome to Therapy Unplugged, the podcast where two therapists offer insights to the real-life issues we all experience. We are your hosts, Sarah Benoit and Meaghan McCullough.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back. It is Meaghan here with Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, good morning. Well, afternoon or whatever
Right,
time zone you're
wherever
in.
you are. It's morning. It's definitely morning for us.
Yes.
And I don't know about you, but I am definitely excited to be discussing our topic today, which
Yes, for sure.
and I know it's kind of funny to say I'm excited because it's literally about building and maintaining healthy habits.
Mm-hmm.
So this might not be the most exciting topic for some people, but well, we'll get into I think why I'm excited about it. So how are you feeling about today's topic?
I'm excited too. I think it's interesting. There's, I think this is a big topic. I mean, if you think about it, this is another one of those where people write whole books on this. But I'm excited about it because I think I'm hoping that everyone can take something away from this and apply
Hmm.
it. And when I say, I said earlier it's lofty or it's a big topic because I think that if you break down your life, there's so many areas that having healthy habits can be really it's critical in my opinion.
Hmm. Absolutely, and I'm glad you said that because we don't want listeners to walk away from this feeling overwhelmed, like, "Oh
Right.
my gosh, Sarah and Meaghan are suggesting," right? That, like, I'm working on all of these categories all at once, and that's not true at all. In fact, what I would like to impart is this is more about you really doing that inquiry within yourself and maybe finding one, maybe two um, habits that you actually feel somewhat. eh, I mean, maybe saying it passionate is too strong of a word to use, but that you can get excited about.
Mhm.
Um, because this is just my opinion, but I honestly believe that when it comes to sound and stable mental health and sound and stable physical health and emotional health. I know that there are a lot of factors that come into play, right? About how we feel. But I would say for me that developing healthy habits is the number one thing that impacts my physical, mental, and emotional health over all others.
Mm.
And yeah, so that's why to me this is so important.
And I think one of the things as you were just saying that, what it made me think of is when I have when I'm in sync and like my habits are like really they're just kind of ingrained, they're popping up. It's like I don't even have to think about it. It keeps me really grounded.
Yeah.
And it's it almost gives me some peace and that in that it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about this because that just happens. You know, similar to like your normal routines, like my normal routine, like I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is brush my teeth. If I didn't do that, then I'm gonna forget because it's just, and then
Mhm.
it throws me off. It's like, "Oh, wait a minute, did I do that?" And it just kinda keeps me personally on a more even keel if I've got those things well established.
Yeah, I completely agree. And not that long ago, I heard someone say that, and I to be perfectly honest with you, I don't remember if I read this now or if it was in a podcast. So I'm sorry to whomever said this, but they said that self-discipline could be reframed as self-care. And
Mhm.
I really liked that idea. We talk a lot about self-care on our podcast. And the reframe that, self-discipline doesn't need to be seen as rigid. It doesn't
Right.
need to be seen as boring. It doesn't need to be seen as like somehow we're having to punish ourselves, right? Like this isn't about I'm going to count calories um, to achieve a certain weight because otherwise I'm just not going to like myself. That's not right. Like that's not what self-discipline, in my opinion, is truly about.
Mhm.
It actually is coming from a place of just a lot of the things we've talked about, like caring about yourself,
Yes.
right? Caring about how you feel physically, caring about how you feel mentally and emotionally. And when we establish and then maintain habits, it's almost like it can lay the groundwork for like a more joy or more purpose in
Right.
in your life. Yeah.
One of the things that I came across, and I've I've read this a few times. I One of the things that I kinda did on my end, for me personally, was I outlined, like, why are healthy habits important?
Yeah.
And it was funny because the word efficiency kept popping up,
Mm,
and I think I had a problem with the word
mhm.
because I was thinking of it in terms of, like, for me, I went back to that episode that we did on toxic productivity, and what I found was interesting after I kind of sat with this a little bit is that efficiency isn't in the sense of, healthy habits, isn't about it's not about productivity, right? It's about actually freeing up
Mm.
space in your brain.
Ooh,
And
I like that.
yeah, and it's about if we're efficient, it really gives our brain ways to, time or space to think about other things, but also it gives us energy to do other things that maybe we want to do.
Mhm.
And so I really had to sit with that because I think it just initially
Mhm.
had this, for me, a negative connotation. And as soon as I kind of sat with it more, I was like, oh no, this makes a lot more sense because again, it's that automation, if you will, where it's like, okay, check. I don't even have to think about that.
I love that, and honestly, I don't think I would have thought about efficiency in that way either. So in this case, it's almost about, um, the ability it's not necessarily about doing more,
Right.
but creating habits that makes life flow easier so that you have space, maybe to relax, for example, or
Hmm.
have fun or, whatever it may be. So that's a
Right.
great one, Sarah.
What do you think of, like, if you think of healthy habits, like, what are, because, we started off by saying we don't want people to get overwhelmed.
Mhm,
Um, what are the ones that are most important to you?
mhm, mhm. Well, this is where it's funny you asked me that question because I think this is how we might not I don't mean think differently because we almost always come back to the same, conclusion, but you have this amazing list. So, listeners, I have Sarah's notes in front of me and she has this amazing list of why it's important to practice healthy habits. And it's in my opinion, it's these great detailed ways of looking at why it's important. I literally wrote down two very broad brush things.
Okay.
And one of them is what I already stated. I think that healthy habits is the number one thing that we can do really to promote healthy, joyful, purposeful living. And I
Mhm.
know that sounds vague, and I'm sure we'll get more into detail about what that means. The other thing I wrote down is that I think that overall, if we have healthy habits, it can really reduce our our stress,
Mhm.
which is kind of the same thing. But I think it's fair to say that so many of us do lead very busy, stressful lives, right? Where things can just start to pile up and feel overwhelming. And maybe it goes back to that idea you said a minute ago about these routines and these healthy habits can ground you.
Mhm.
I think when we're grounded, we have the ability to to really handle whatever it is that comes our way on a day-to-day basis. So, I'm looking at it kind of big picture, but I love that we can look at it big picture and then we can bring it down, right, to more specifics like the one you started with, which
Mm,
is this idea of it can help you to become more efficient, but almost in the way of efficient so that life flows and then leaves room for other things.
right, right. And it's interesting, the reason I asked you that question is I think up until actually creating the notes for this, I could have articulated all these different areas where it's important, to have healthy habits, whether that's your mental health, your financial health, your physical health. But my bias really, at least in my head, came
Mhm,
through because my first go to when I think of healthy habits is physical health.
mhm,
I think of it, and I don't know if it's because of my age. I don't know, my stage in life where I say, oh my gosh, if we're not taking care of ourselves physically,
mhm,
I don't want to get cancer. I don't want to have a stroke or a heart
mhm,
attack.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and It's but it's interesting because I can tell you when I was in my 20s, that
mhm.
was not on my radar,
Right, exactly. Yep.
I mean, and I know we talk a lot about, things like sleep and stress reduction and things like that, um, but I would be curious, and this is something I think listeners to maybe think about if you decide that you want to create a new habit is not just looking at, um, those different areas, but in what stage of life are you? Like, what is important to you? For example,
Mhm,
if you're in your 20s or 30s and, um, you are active in your career, maybe skill development
mm,
is something that you wanna gain some healthy habits. Maybe it means having boundaries in the workplace or boundaries with your time where, you really wanna be going out with friends, but "Well, I've gotta get up at 6 in the morning to go to work. I need my sleep. Alright, I guess I need to prioritize that."
absolutely. Yeah, and I think, you're getting into something that I know I put in my notes under this idea of, okay, well, how do you start to build healthy habits?
Mhm,
And what you're speaking to, at least in my mind right now, is the first thing I put on the list, which is in terms of building healthy habits, which is intention, right?
mm,
So really thinking about what okay, so I want to build my career, or I want to lose weight, or I whatever it may be. I really think it's important to do that self-inquiry around, okay, but what is the true intention,
yes,
right,
yes,
behind this habit? Because my experience, and I admit it's just my experience, right? So not everybody is going to resonate with this, but what I've found through the years is that I really have to be clear and I have to really want whatever the goal is. So, you bring up aging, and I
mhm,
think for us being close to the same age, that's a big one for both of us, right? So I
right,
completely agree with you. Right now, when I think of building healthy habits, my number one like overarching intention is to age, like, as gracefully as I can,
mm,
right? Like, there's something called functional fitness. I mean, there's different names for it, but it's literally where, you're working on exercises that you would do in your day-to-day life that you might not even think about. For example, carrying in groceries, right?
mhm,
So, an example of functional fitness might be, at my local Y, so you pick up some kettlebells that are fairly heavy and you walk around the track a couple of times where you're just holding them, right?
mhm,
And it's literally this idea, right, of uh, 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 you know 10, 15, 20 years from now, I want to be able to do that.
mm,
And so the intention is where we start, in my opinion, and you're absolutely right. It's going to be different for everybody. It
Right.
certainly would not have been my intention when I was in my 20s or 30s, maybe not even in my 40s. Um, so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Are there any other, just kind of things you wanna mention in terms of the why it's
Um,
important?
let's see. Um, I think the only well, not the only, I think the 2 things I would throw out there, and this kind of ties into what you were just talking about around the functional fitness. If you think of, like, using your example, so your ultimate goal, right, is so 20, 30 years from now, you wanna be able to still be able to bring your groceries into the house
Right.
and maybe even do more. And so what you're talking about, like, that's your goal. And so if we establish healthy habits now, it's going to allow us to achieve those goals, but have it be sustainable. So it's the
Yes.
sustainability. I think the other one I would throw out there that we haven't talked about is the healthy habit of time management. And I bring that up more so because I always hear about this, but it's that work life balance piece.
Mhm.
And I think if we are, again, planning our time effectively in prioritizing, it gives us more time to do the things that we want.
Mhm.
And that balance is so important because I think that when we do feel more in balance, that we're not just spending all our time at work or on things we don't want to do, that does lead into the health aspect where our stress is decreased. We are enjoying things more. So hopefully that means the physical health risks are lessened also.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep. All very good points. And do you feel, does it make more sense right now, I don't really have a preference, but to talk more about these potential categories, right? Because not everybody is gonna resonate with everyone, of healthy habits?
Mhm.
Or does it make more sense to kinda go into, just ideas we might have about how to start perhaps either breaking bad habits or creating new habits that we want?
I guess I'm wondering, do you think have we missed anything in terms of the categories? Or are you talking about breaking them out differently?
Well, at least in my notes, I I did break down healthy habits into, how many? I guess only 3 categories, and we certainly don't need to go through every one because, healthy habits are gonna look different for different people. But just for clarity, what I did is I broke it down into physical health categories,
Mhm.
and so these included things like, sleep,
Yep.
uh, movement or exercise, nutrition. I also put on my list, maintenance, and I think what I mean by that for physical health is things like, I know that some people struggle with things like, just, setting up regular dentist appointments, for example,
Mm.
or another maintenance one might be, taking prescription medications every day at the same time and or supplements at the same time. I
Mhm.
know a lot of people struggle with those kind of things. Um, so that I had on my physical category list. And then I had emotional and mental health category, and I kind of grouped that together.
Mhm.
And that would include things like, a lot of the things we've already talked about, like developing healthy inner dialogue,
Mhm.
developing self-awareness, um, feeling comfortable with spending time alone,
Mhm.
And then the last category I have, and again, for some people this might not resonate, but I do have a spiritual health category.
Mhm,
And this might include things like habits to work towards having a meditation practice,
mhm.
or the habit of spending time in nature. Um, so I maybe the point here is to let listeners know that there's an endless list, right, of categories or habits that you might want to focus on. And we are just suggesting, or I'm suggesting, just pick
Right.
one or two, right? And
And
maybe some of, yep, sorry, go right ahead.
I was sorry, I was gonna say I'm really glad that you shared these because I think that's helpful to kind of do like a 30,000-foot view, like, okay, what is physical
Mhm.
health? And then breaking it down because I think sometimes that idea of even establishing a habit can feel overwhelming, even if you're narrowing it down, and to your point, picking 1 or 2, but I think the way you just outlined that is really helpful.
Good. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I know that you did a great job of not only kind of talking about creating a new like tips on how to
Yep.
create a new habit, but also tips on, we'd be amiss probably not to bring into the discussion at least a little bit. Like this also might mean breaking habits that are having a negative impact
Yes.
on you. So I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that.
Um, yeah, if you don't mind, let's kind of just quickly do the breaking a habit,
Absolutely. Yep.
and I think here's the interesting part. I think, um I mean, this is probably the last thing I'm gonna mention, but I'm actually gonna start with it, is that the important thing here is to be kind to yourself, right? Because think of if you've been doing something that's quote unquote a bad habit
Mhm.
for a long time, you aren't just gonna wake up tomorrow and be like, "Whew, cool. I don't wanna do this anymore, so I'm not doing it anymore."
Right, right, right.
Um, and so I think the first thing is to acknowledge that the bad habit is an issue. Is it interfering with your life? Is it interfering with relationships, your health, your finances, whatever it is? Um, and here's, I think, the hard part is really identifying the triggers because this means sitting with yourself and acknowledging that, okay, something is happening that is leading me to do X. So, for example, um, if stress is a big trigger and it's like you end of your day, you come home and it's like, oh, I'm going to have a martini. And you do that every night. It becomes a habit, right? It's just, you
Mhm.
might not even think about it. It's like, well, that's
Right.
just what I do. But if you were to sit with it, well, why? Why am I using this as a essentially coping strategy after having a stressful day? And so then I think it's the next step is, okay, how do I replace this with something
Mhm.
healthy?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and again, this to your point, if much like if we're establishing a new habit, I think it's important with breaking an old habit. Don't, if you're having that martini every night, don't wake up the next morning and say, okay, that's it. I'm just drinking water from now on. I mean, if you can, that's awesome.
Mhm.
It's, "Okay, what do I need to do to make this slower?" Well, what do I need to do to chunk this down and make this more
Right.
realistic? Um, so that is gonna be the part that takes some planning, I mean, I have seen people do this where using just kinda sticking with this, I'll stick with the theme of addiction, where and I've seen this a lot with clients where they will substitute essentially, it's like, "Yeah, I used to come home and I would drink every night, but then I started getting into exercise, and then I would go to the gym a few times a week. Now I run every day." And is it a substitution one for one? Sure, you could make that argument, but what you've chosen is a much healthier habit, and
Mhm.
my guess, at least my hope, is that your mindset has changed too, and that
Right.
there's it's the kind of that rewiring of the brain where you're looking forward to this and you feel good, but you feel good in a different way. And it's something that takes you, what's the word I'm looking for? it's sustainable, right? It's like
Right.
you can feel that benefit for hours later or weeks later because you know, like, "Hey, look what I'm doing, and I feel great doing this."
Mhm. Yeah, no, I love all of these, and just one the only thing I would add, is going back to this idea of intentionality
Yes.
so when you identify what the trigger is, okay, so stress is making me right, you fill in the blank, go home and
Mhm,
eat 3 chocolate bars or drink whatever, the martini or more than 1 martini.
mhm,
Um, I think also what's important is to really narrow down the why you feel specifically, let's just say it's having a martini a night. Why is that not okay for you? Right?
right.
And I know that sounds so simple, but I think that sometimes, like, when I work with clients, I'm a life coach too, and so we do a lot of this kind of work in life coaching. It certainly comes up in therapy too, but I think that, you really have to be clear and want, for example, to stop, you know, eating the whatever it is at night or stop the drinking
Mhm,
or whatever habit we're talking about. You need to be clear about uh, how this is negatively impacting you.
right.
And your desire to stop that negative impact, this is just what I've experienced, has to be greater than the temporary dopamine hit or just that you may get from the chocolate or whatever it is, or maybe the drink allows you to numb out,
Mhm,
so you think you're not as stressed. But really, maybe when you stop and do the self-inquiry, it's like, "Okay, is that really true? Is the alcohol really actually helping here, or is it contributing to my depression?" For example, right? So, I think that the intention needs to be clear, because if it's kinda wishy-washy, I don't think the habit is going to stick.
I agree, and I'm really glad you brought that up, and I think what you said is critical where that that desire and that goal has to be greater
Mhm.
because, I mean, I read somewhere, and I don't remember how they worded it, but and I know we're gonna get into, like, in terms of how you create habits, but it was something to the effect of, um, my words, like, "Make it irresistible." You know?
Ooh, I like that.
It's like you can't not do it.
Make it irresistible. Right, so that might automatically narrow down your your choices, right, in terms of what you might wanna work on, but
Yes.
I agree with that. It's gotta be something that excites you, right?
Yes.
Like, if you're wanting to lose weight, because you have a wedding in 3 months and you wanna fit into the dress, okay, well, that that might work short term, right? Um, but uh, is that irresistible, as you said, enough, like, to then help you keep with your healthy habits or your healthy eating long term? I don't know. I mean, for me, I don't think so.
Mhm.
Now, if I have the goal of, for example, right, like, just being in the best physical condition I can as I get older so that my life feels good and fulfilling, okay, that maybe I can get on board with. So, um, it just really does depend on you specifically and what is driving you and what's
Right.
exciting you. Yeah.
And I think and I'm gonna switch gears for a sec here,
Mhm.
but you know me with my statistics and figures sometimes.
Mhm.
But, that idea of, say, if you have a wedding in 3 months, right? So it takes between 18 and 254 days to build a new habit. So and it takes, on average, 66 days for that habit to become automatic. So using that example of fitting into a dress for a wedding, right?
Mhm.
Say if it's 3 months. Okay, so that's 90 days,
Mhm.
and think of what we as humans do, right? when we achieve our goal, we're so excited we want to celebrate.
Mhm.
And if you are like, I did this, like I got into X size dress and now I'm going to go and have a feast. That's great.
Right, right.
But if that habit is not ingrained and that
Mhm,
and that mentality isn't still like, okay, this was a treat. If you fall off the wagon, so to speak,
mhm.
it's so easy to just get back into what we know, right? Because we're creatures of habit.
Yes.
And we are creatures of we like things to be familiar. So
Right.
I think there's again, it's to bring back that intentionality, it's keeping it right in the forefront. We always have to
Absolutely.
see it, so to speak.
Yes. Yep. I completely agree, and one other thought I'm having is, again, using this hypothetical wedding, example. For me, that wouldn't be enough because to keep a healthy habit going because, okay, then what happens when the wedding's over?
Right.
It's like it's that does that excitement is that excitement or desire or that feeling of irresistibility, as you said, going to continue to drive me? For me, probably not.
Mhm.
So it has to be something to keep that habit going. It has to, for me, be something like a greater pull to keep it going.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to get into a little bit more about tips on how to create and maintain healthy habits?
Sure. Um, I think and I don't know if listeners, if you've heard of this before. Interestingly enough, I hadn't, although it makes a lot of sense to me. There's something called the SMART goal technique setting, or setting technique, sorry.
Yep.
And so, for example, the S in SMART is specific. So, and this is kind of what we've been talking about, making sure that your goal is really hyper focused. So, you don't want to be broad. You don't want to say, okay, I want to eat healthier. You really want to drill down. So, you might want to say, okay, specifically, I'm going to eat 2 more servings of vegetables a day. Or
Hmm.
instead of, say, crackers for a snack, I'm gonna make sure I'm eating an apple.
Hmm.
It's really, really kind of picking something tangible. The next step would be make it measurable. So the M in SMART. Know what success looks like for your goal and make sure that you can measure its progress. So using that example of, say, 2 more servings of vegetables a day. Do you
Hmm.
need to record it? Do you need to have a chart? Do you need to write it
Right.
down? Um, the A, achievable. Again, make sure you're setting yourself up for success by picking a goal that you know you can achieve. If your goal is to eat, you know, 10 more servings of vegetables a day,
Hmm.
probably not going to happen. I mean, that's a lot to even do. But if you say 1 or 2, that is probably more realistic.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the R, which is realistic. And that is really about being honest with yourself about what you can manage, given your lifestyle, your resources. Um, if you know that going to the gym every morning is going to conflict with getting to work on time, getting the kids to school, getting the animals fed in the morning, okay, maybe you need to put that in a different place in the day that is really going to make more sense. Um, and then the T stands for time bound. And what that means is to put some time boundaries around your goal. So when do you want to achieve this? Do you want to achieve this goal within the next month, within the next quarter, within the next year? Um, and I think the important thing there, again, is being consistent, but have some flexibility, right? So, like, if your goal is, I want to be here in a month, if you get 90% of the way there,
Hmm.
come the 4 weeks, that's okay. You might have
Right.
to do some tweaking. Um, And make sure you're giving yourself credit, right? Because I think one of the things that we do as human beings is, like you mentioned, is that negative self-talk. Like, we're really good at beating ourselves up or, this isn't good enough. But if you're
Hmm.
tracking your progress, if you are celebrating along the way, and giving yourself credit for those successes, it's also going to keep you motivated to continue with these habits.
Exactly. And I love that you brought SMART goals into this, and if listeners are resonating with any of what you're saying, there are so many resources online that you can just pull up on these SMART goals. And I think that it's a great way to really break things down. And I think that SMART goals is also a great way to start a new habit, right?
Yes.
Because it's all so very reasonable. And that's what we're shooting for here, especially if you're just starting something new.
Right.
You really don't want to overdo it. You don't want to overshoot what you think you can do, because that's going to possibly lead you to not reach it and then feel badly. So,
Yes. Yeah. And I just want to share, you're making me think about this as a personal example. It's okay to kind of stop and reset. And here's the example I'm going to give you. So I've created a Substack page personally, and I've done it for a couple of reasons. I want to share more mental health
mm,
aspects out there.
mhm,
My own kind of musings, the book that I've written. I mean, there's all sorts of things. And in my mind, I'm like, I can do this. Like, I'm just going to, I'm going to just write here every day and share whatever. I've literally sat in front of my computer for 3 days and gone, what do I say?
yeah,
And and I think and you really just sparked this. If I were to sit down and use the SMART goal
yep,
framework, I think this would be so much easier because I
yeah,
think a couple things are happening. I'm not being realistic about the goals.
mhm, mhm,
I'm not being specific because in my
right,
head it's swirling and I think, "Oh my gosh, I have all these great things to say." Um, but which doesn't mean it's gonna make any sense to anybody else if I don't
mhm,
put some structure to it.
mhm, mhm,
And I'm so not being efficient because I sit there and I just look at the screen and go, "What do I wanna say today?"
right, you're waiting to be inspired.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
And I certainly don't wanna be a robot, but, now that we're sitting here talking about this, I'm like, "This is exactly what I need to do. I need to sit down and do it for me," right? Because it is not gonna take up so much space in my head. I'm gonna feel better about this, and it is gonna become a habit where I can just make this part of my day,
mhm.
feel good about it, and be like, "Okay, cool. Now I have time to do the other things." And it's just so funny that it's taken us to sit here having this conversation
That's awesome.
for the bell to ring, you know?
Right, right. Yeah, no, I love that you shared that, and, such a good personal example, right? In real time
Yeah.
too, that you're realizing. And, there's just one more thing I really want to say about, like, these tips,
Mhm.
for starting new habits, and, what's funny is, you could even put it in the SMART goals, except SMART would have 2 S's.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm making this up right now on the fly. Okay, so it's SSMART. So all the ones that Sarah just said, but the second S for me, besides being specific, or honestly, this would probably be my first S, is start small.
Mm.
It it's there is I know that's just so simple to say, but I am telling you, there is such power in starting with, like, another term I've heard tossed around is a micro habit.
Mm.
Um, I, recently listened to a Mel Robbins podcast that, I highly recommend anyone who's resonating with any of what we're saying today, I highly recommend this particular interview she did, and I'll put it in the show notes. Um, but she interviewed a doctor, and I apologize ahead of time if I mispronounce his name, but it's Ragan Chatterjee. Dr. Chatterjee is his name. And she interviewed him about, one of the books he's written, and what he calls them is pillars. We were calling them categories,
Mhm.
but the 4 pillars of just sound health, basically. And, I don't need to go through them all. If you're interested, you can certainly look him up, and I'll put it in the show notes. But the reason why I'm bringing it up specifically is because in the podcast, he talked about, I believe he was working with a patient who was very overweight and had a lot of health issues. And this doctor was trying to help him come up with an exercise plan. And he came up with this plan for him, and the patient was all on board and excited. Um, and, he told him to, to practice this plan. I can't remember for how long. Let's say it was a month, and then he was going to come back. And it completely flopped, right?
Hmm.
It was the exercise plan was way too intense to start with. And what this patient ended up doing instead is he was like, all right, so I cannot um I know I'm not going to do an hour a day.
Mhm.
um but one morning in the kitchen, he got this idea as he was waiting for his coffee to brew. I think I might have already shared this with you, but I just love this story. So as he's waiting for his coffee to brew, he decided that in the time it took for his coffee to brew, he was just going to do some basic exercises.
Mhm.
So he did some lunges. He did some push-ups, literally like counter push-ups,
Yep.
where you're using the counter as the sturdy base. And it probably was about 5 minutes, right, where it took for the coffee to brew, and he started doing that every morning. And what happened is that over, let's say, the course of however long it was, a month of doing this every morning, his brain started to rewire,
Mm.
right? And he suddenly started to, "Okay, well, if I can do this for 5 minutes, what can I do in 10 minutes?" And so I'm only bringing it up because I think it's a concept that's so simple, but it's overlooked a lot when we think about starting something new.
Yes.
Um, yeah. Yeah, I'm just adding in that S. Start small.
No, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it made me think of I remember working with a family, this was a long time ago, but they had 3 children, and all of them were on the autism spectrum, and 2 were nonverbal. Um, and we were doing home-based work at the time, and we had a BCBA coming in and setting up a plan to help with behaviors and structure and everything like
Mhm.
that. Um, and it was really challenging because the family wasn't sharing this with the BCBA, they would share it with me, which was, "This is a great plan, but it's so not realistic for our household."
Yep.
And it's like, I can do one of these things, but I cannot
Yep.
do all 10 of these things.
Yep.
And it's it was really interesting because we all had to sit down. I mean, and thankfully we had these kind of meetings where we would all get together and check in and kind of go over the treatment plan and what was working and what wasn't. But we had to have that conversation, and it's hard because you've got this big plan, this big goal, and it's like, "Yes, I wanna be on the other side of that, but you're expecting me to do X, Y, and Z when I'm doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and now I can't." And
Right.
and I think that was what strikes me about that is I remember giving the family a lot of credit for being honest about what they couldn't handle and what wasn't gonna be realistic. And I think it's, as a provider, important to not take something like that personally. Like, you're wanting the
Yeah.
best for this family, and you're seeing like these things could work, but you have to work within their boundaries and their lifestyle and what works for them. And that's a broad, I mean, a big example, if you will. But to
Mhm.
your point, it's starting small, and and have it be manageable. And something like I'm sure that example that you said, like when that gentleman got to that place of, hey, if I can do this in 5 minutes, can you imagine
Yep.
what I can do in 10 minutes? And if all you're saying is, what could I do in 6 minutes? Um,
Mhm.
like
Yep.
I will do that with myself at the gym, and I do it on the days, like I hate the treadmill, but I do the treadmill.
Mhm.
And I only do 15 minutes. That's my warm up. But there are times where I'm like, "Okay, you hate this so much." I mean, this is gonna this is gonna sound messed up. What if you go another minute? Or like you've really struggled to get to 14 minutes. Can you push yourself to do the 15
Mm.
minutes? And I
Mhm.
will. And I'll
Mhm.
even sometimes if I'm, like, going out of my mind and I'm like, "All right, I've done 10 minutes. I'm gonna go do my regular workout, and on the back end, I'm gonna finish my 5 minutes."
Yep.
You may have to get creative with yourself too.
Yeah, that's that flexibility, right,
Yes,
that we were talking about earlier. You don't have to be so rigid, and it sounds like in that instance, you found a creative solution, right? Like,
right.
if you're really hating it, okay, stop, go do something else maybe that is a little more enjoyable, and then see, can I come back to it?
Exactly.
Um, yep, yep, I'm glad you mentioned that. Is there anything else you want to add or you feel like we've forgotten before we wrap up with today's topic?
I think we've done a pretty good job of covering everything. I don't think so. I think we're
Yeah.
good.
Okay. And we will definitely include, excuse me, some resources in the
Yes.
show notes. I will include the podcast in case anyone is interested. And the doctor I mentioned has also written a lot of books. I honestly haven't read them yet, but I'm interested in probably reading a couple.
Mhm.
Um, so for anyone that is interested, that information will be in the show notes. And stay tuned next time when Sarah and I are going to tackle the very important topic of seasonal affective disorder. I think, we just hit November in New
Mhm.
England. We just experienced a time change this
Yes.
past weekend. And we really want to address this subject because I think it impacts many, many people. So stay tuned for that.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that one. I think that'll be helpful.
Okay, good. All right. Take good care, everybody, and we will talk to you next time.
Take good care. If you want to share your thoughts or ideas with us, you can email us at therapyunpluggedpodcast@proton.me. Until next time, be sure to subscribe to Therapy Unplugged on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you get your podcasts.